What's up, Military Millionaires? Today's episode is with Erin Helle, who is an Army officer veteran and also a spouse, now full-time spouse, real estate investor, who's had a lot of success in different markets. And this is just a fun episode. And we talk about a lot of things about real estate, but also specifically about how this could be a great job for you as a spouse or for your spouse. And it's just a really cool episode. So definitely check it out. Stay through all the way to the end. And as always, show notes are found at FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast. Now relax and enjoy the show.
You're listening to the Military Millionaire Podcast, a show about real estate investing for the working class. Stay tuned as we explore ways to help you improve your finances, build wealth through real estate, and become a person that is worth knowing.
Hey guys, on this podcast we talk a lot about the roadblock to success for military members in getting started in real estate investing. For many of us, the barriers of time, location, and not having the right knowledge keep us from building wealth while serving our country. Well, let me tell you about Storehouse 310 Ventures. They get it. Storehouse 310 Ventures is owned by two active duty naval officers that love to make investing fun, lucrative, and have a passion for education, theirs and yours alike. They offer full turnkey rental properties in a market where the numbers make sense, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yes, Milwaukee, home to the almost 2018 division titled Milwaukee Brewers, the well-known Miller Brewing Company, and a lot of delicious cheese. Storehouse 310's properties are fully renovated, leased, and have property management in place. Through their rigorous analysis and selection process, they do everything possible to ensure each rental property meets their high standards and offers fantastic returns. Storehouse 310s allows you to invest with confidence while you are living out of state. They have a network of lenders, insurance companies, contractors, a title company, and much more to serve you all along the way. There is absolutely no reason not to get started when you have the right teams and system in place. David and Stu, the owners of Storehouse 310, have been investing themselves for over 15 years. They are on a mission to help as many active duty, reserves, and military veterans create financial freedom through the power of real estate investing. They are honest, transparent, and they prioritize service and giving. They have even committed to give the first 10% of their profits to partner nonprofit organizations that support veteran causes. For more information about their program, send an email to podcast@storehouse310turnkey.com. Again, that is podcast@storehouse310turnkey.com. Tell David and Stu you heard about them through the Military Millionaire Podcast, and they will get you going down the right path. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Dave and Alex from the Military Millionaire Podcast, and we are here with Erin Helle, who is a 10-year Army veteran, 14 if you count college and everything else, who I recently heard on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and halfway through I don't even think the podcast was finished when I shot her a message on Instagram, and then I don't know if she responded, so I shot her a message on LinkedIn too, and eventually got a hold of her, and so we wanted to come, and just awesome to have her on the show. So Erin, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Yeah, so I'm Erin Helle. I am an Army vet. I'm an Army spouse now and a mom to two little girls, and I am a real estate investor. I started investing when I got out of the Army I got out about 3 years ago. I've been investing a little over 2 years, and I started slow. I bought a new construction rental and then got into a really quick and easy flip. And now I'm using IRAs to buy multifamilies. I own a 10 unit. I own some short-term rentals, and I just kind of have slowly scaled it. And I'm continuing to learn how to leverage what I have and continuing to navigate this ever-changing environment to grow my portfolio and build my legacy.
What market are you in, Erin?
Well, I'm in Clarksville, Tennessee, is a lot of my rentals right outside of Fort Campbell. And I'm doing flips in Nashville, also doing flips in San Antonio, potentially some new builds in San Antonio, Texas, and then trying to get into the Fayetteville, North Carolina market.
That's my market. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Well, you can't come here. So
we actually have a courthouse deal we're trying to work through, but the courthouse just closed. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Alex is a huge fan that somebody went on the Bigger Pockets podcast and toted how great their market was. And now it's like just everybody and their mother invests there.
Oh, in Fayetteville? Yeah, I told everybody about Fayetteville about 2 years ago, and it exploded here.
I try to avoid using my city name.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely comes with a burden. If you tell people where you invest, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds good," and then the whole world descends upon it. Although I will say, I don't know about Clarksville, but Nashville is. I mean, nobody. I mean, Nashville is long found out about.
Absolutely.
But let me ask you
We're on the
this.
tail end of it now, I think.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this though. Why did you pick those two markets, the two besides Vail? Why did you pick those? Were you stationed there?
So we were living in Tennessee at the time, in Clarksville at the time, and I didn't know anything about markets. I didn't even know that markets were different. I mean, I obviously knew that you could price, home prices varied, but I just didn't even really know how to look at a market. I didn't know how to analyze one, but I just happened to be in a great rental market, and I was able to buy a new construction home that cash flows, which blows people's mind. But I started looking at some older homes that needed renovations, and it just wasn't something I wanted to get into my very first deal. And so I started looking at new builds. The numbers just made sense. And that's really when I learned how powerful the Clarksville market is. And when I told people that I owned a new build investment, and I just saw their eyes pop out of their head, I was like, oh, I'm onto something here. Like, if I can buy something new and it cash flows, there's something to be said about this market. And a lot of it has to do with, the consistent renters, and then also the low taxes. So I just happened to be in a good place in Clarksville, and that's where it all started. And then as that kind of slowed down, and the flips we're doing flips in Nashville. We're wrapping up 2 right now. I think that we may slow down there as well, just because there's just less deals to be found. There's less to do now. We're, like I said, kind of at the tail end of the growth, and now we're everything's kind of leveling out. So it's harder to find deals. And so we started looking in San Antonio. We have a great team there, a really awesome realtor and an awesome general contractor who is going to take us places, like that. Those boots on the ground are what has allowed us to, we started in that market in January, and we're finishing up 3 renovations right now.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know that much about San Antonio, but boots on the ground, like for people who invest long distance, I mean, your team is your lifeline, your contractor. If you do rentals, your property manager, sometimes your realtor, like how you source deals for sure. But yeah, it's good to hear you say that, like your lifeline. I mean, if you're not going to be there, then you need somebody there that really cares about your properties. Otherwise.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's why we've been able to scale San Antonio. We've been trying to get into Fayetteville for the same amount of time. But like I said, we're just working toward our first deal right now with the courthouse. And that one's just been slower because we don't have the same team on the ground.
Yeah. And Fayetteville has a 10-day upset bid. And well, I don't want to put out too many people's business, but there are people in town who will go around and upset bids just to complicate other investors. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah. So I'm not saying I'm one of those people.
I was going to say, is that an Alex Felice, like someone who likes to interject chaos and watch people react? Seems right up your alley.
I'm just saying, on day 9, don't be surprised if they all get upset.
That's good to know. So we put in our first courthouse deal probably 12 days ago, and we just found out that we got it, and now the courthouse is closed. So I'm not sure how this will play out, but we'll be ready whenever it happens.
Yeah.
Nice. Just tell them they owe you interest.
I'll let you know how that goes.
Oh, man. All right. So Alex looked like he had a question.
What's up with the 10 unit?
The 10 unit. Okay, this one's really fun. So we found this it was an MLS listing. It was sold by an agent. So the agent was the owner. So I was the agent as well as the buyer. So I was able to communicate and negotiate directly with the seller, which, is always nice, especially when you're dealing with something distressed. So we came across this property on the MLS, 10-unit property listed for, I want to say like 560 or 570. We ended up, yeah, I think that was right. We ended up getting it for 518 after all negotiations. We did the inspection, and a lot of stuff came back, which we anticipated was going to happen. And then I used that to negotiate the deal down a little bit. Got a conventional commercial loan on that property, 20-year adjustable rate mortgage. It'll adjust in 10 years, and a decent interest rate, 5.85. It was good at the time, not as good as, we're talking about right now, but a decent interest rate. And we bought that and basically have been slowly flipping that whole property. So it's 10 separate houses on a wooded lot right outside of Fort Campbell. And it's this cute little like secluded, looks like a campground, really. It's these A-framed houses. They have these tin roofs, and the whole exterior of the house is the roof. So they look like these little teepees. And so what we've done so far is we've redone four and a half of the roofs. We're able to do half a roof at a time. And then we've done like 3 interiors. And so we're going to do we'll do roof and then interior as tenants move out. And we have up to the rent, at least some of them were paying like $600 or $625, and it's now $800 or higher. And so we bought that. We ended up buying it for like $518, and it's I would say, and it appraised at $560. But I would say if we got an appraisal today, just a year later, that it would probably be easily worth $800,000 based on what we've put into it and based on the financials now.
Nice. Yeah. What market is that in?
That's in Clarksville.
Okay. Is that where you guys are stationed? Where are you guys stationed at?
Well, now we're actually in Monterey. My husband's going to Naval Postgraduate School remotely at the moment, but that's where he's assigned. So we're out in Monterey, which is a great place to be on lockdown and quarantine. The weather's been pretty great. But we'll go right back there. My husband came from a pretty specialized unit at Fort Campbell, and after he's done here, he'll very likely go right back there. So
that's cool to be able to, while in the military, have some stability. There's the Marine Corps is not generally like that. There's only a few very small communities where there's like 2 or 3 options and that's it. Most of the Marine Corps is very much all over the place. I don't know how the Army is as a whole, but I know there's some units in like the Air Force where they are totally cool with you homesteading for like years, like 10, 12, 15 years. That's like almost a career ender in the Marine Corps to stay in one place that long. But I think it's really cool if you can have some kind of stability like that while, because I always joke with people like, oh, you're an investor while in the military. Are you a long distance real estate investor yet? Like, what do you mean? Like, you're still active duty at some point, whether you like it or not, you're going to be long distance.
Yep.
So, man, you give me that look.
Go on with your bad self.
So I guess the next question that I had for you, which kind of leads into something we wanted to talk about anyway, is now that you're doing this as a spouse, what are your thoughts as far as like, what are some advantages, disadvantages to being a essentially full-time real estate investor as a spouse, as opposed to, I've written a couple articles. In fact, probably the most flack I ever got on an article was I wrote an article about finding a job, like how, best jobs for spouses. Because my wife had a lot of struggles with that at one point. And I got a whole bunch of flack about how I can't talk about that because I'm not a spouse. But that being said, I recognize that there are limitations. Like if you're a lawyer, you may have an issue getting a law firm job because no matter how overeducated you are, that's not a career someone wants to hire you for 6 months or 2 years. So I guess my question would just be like, how does being a spouse play into the real estate investing career? What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I do know that the unemployment rate for military spouses is like 16%, and the underemployment rate is higher than 20%. So those are alarming statistics. They're talking right now about like implications of coronavirus with unemployment being as high as 20%, and it's like unheard of, but that's our reality all the time, whether or not we're dealing with a global pandemic. So that really puts that into perspective. And the reason for that is like we just talked about, you move around a lot. Employers usually figure out that you're military, and whether you can tell them you're staying or not, they usually can put it together. So it's hard. It's hard to find the right jobs in the right area. And it is a full-time job just to find a job. So a lot of spouses don't even find it worth their time to pursue a job when they're only going somewhere for a year or 18 months. It just doesn't always make sense. And then coupling the cost of childcare on that, especially if you're underemployed and you're not making the money that you could be making, but you're still paying a ton in childcare, and then you're not being fulfilled, it's like, what's the point? So anyway, I think that this being a a real estate investor is ideal for the military spouse. And I think that for multiple reasons. For one, you're an entrepreneur, right? You're running your own business, which can be a little bit scary getting into, but we have such a great thing to fall back on in terms of our spouse's consistent and reliable income, and then the benefits, So when I decided to put so much into investing and really risk a lot and get into a lot of these properties, I didn't have to worry about paying for healthcare. I didn't have to worry about my family being on the streets because we separated. We lived off my husband's income, and then we set some money aside to invest in the business and to invest in real estate. And it's been great. So we know that no matter how bad things get, it doesn't affect our day-to-day lives. So I think that we're at a good advantage in that sense as a military spouse, because we have those playing in our favor. And then also, this is something you can totally do from home, and not saying it's going to be easy. It's total chaos a lot of times. And when I first started out, I didn't have any childcare because I wasn't making any money to pay for childcare. And now it's a different story. I have part-time childcare and can justify that expense, but it was still worth it in the beginning for me to be building something that maybe only paid a little bit at the time, but I know that our future will look so much better because of the work that I put in 2 years ago and over the last couple of years. So, and it also scales, but when you scale it and when you continue to build your income, the time requirement doesn't continue to build as well. So it's not like if you own 3 properties, you're now working 3 times the amount as if you owned one. It just doesn't work like that. So you can scale it, but still give yourself that same time flexibility, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. I mean, you hit on some very key points there. So the biggest issue that my wife had was she's in a fairly specialized field, and it was a competitive job field to get a job in. And if you do find a job, people know you're going to leave or whatever. So, and I had talked to her about trying to find an online way to earn income, something that you can move with you. And I think that's one of the beauties of real estate, is that you can absolutely do it from anywhere in the world, given that you have internet, and you can do it on your schedule. So if you need to, when the kids are still asleep or napping or whatever, like there are some ways to try to mitigate the chasing kids around while negotiating real estate deals. But I think a lot of that freedom to be able to do that, I think that's huge, especially because, I mean, sitting around the house not having a job is not good for anybody's mental health. So you got to do something with your life. So
also, I wonder if sorry, David. I wonder if you mentioned.
He's not sorry.
I'm not. I wonder if what you mentioned was like the money is slow at first, and I think that deters a lot of people from real estate. They can't see it, right? You're like, hey, look, you're gonna make $200 a door per month on these properties, and you're like, $200 a door for that kind of risk or that kind of debt doesn't seem worth it. But I like that you brought up, like, hey, man, once you get 3 or 4 of these things, and well, now if you had 5 at $200 a door, now you're at $1,000 a month, and now it starts to make sense. Well, what if you get 20?
Yeah.
And it really starts to scale that way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't lend itself to the traditional, I think a lot of the Army wives get into selling Scentsy or selling makeup and these things that are a little maybe get rich quick. It's the opposite of the get rich quick scheme. And so I like that you say, hey, look, I can stay home. I can invest my time into this. And yeah, it has a slow payback period, but it has a tremendous payback period over time.
Yeah. And the power is in the value of your portfolio in the long term. It's in that equity. It's definitely not in the cash flow in the beginning. But once you pay off your mortgages and once you're debt free, when your husband's ready to retire and you can retire off these rentals too, like you're talking about big money at that point, and you're talking about significant life change. And so I think that, and the other thing for me is like when you have these goals of like that are future specific and future oriented, it makes being disciplined in the moment that much easier. And it makes that sort of sacrifice that much easier to kind of wrap your head around. And I think that some women, and I speak for women because I'm a woman, but obviously men can stay at home with the kids too. But some women can stay at home just fine but a lot of women can't. And I think there's, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, is because I get all the time like, oh, you're just a stay-at-home mom, and then I get the opposite where it's like, you're working, like your poor kids are going to suffer because of that. So you can't listen to what other people are going to say because you can't ever do it right. You need to do what's right for you. And I tried to be a stay-at-home mom when I first got out of the military, and I was terrible. I was miserable. I had a hard time transitioning out of the military. I had also became a mom around the same time. My husband was deployed, and I was hanging out at home with a kid who couldn't talk. And it was really hard. And I definitely dealt with a lot of stuff during that time. And finding my network, getting connected again through real estate with like-minded people, and then also having something to work toward was everything to me. And it has made me a better wife. It has made me a better spouse. And oh, by the way, I'm now creating something that will be great to hand off to my kids and will give us a great retirement and be able to really enjoy their teenage years, because that's when it's really going to matter.
Woo! We'll be back with the show in just a minute, but I wanted to take a brief second and say that, look, you are already obviously investing in yourself by listening to this podcast. But if you can't figure out how to get past all that daunting crap that you just don't know how to sort through, and you're trying to get started in real estate investing and you're just stuck, I mean, it happens to all of us. It's daunting. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know everything there is to know, and you don't know really where to find all the information. So that is why I created the Real Estate Investing for Beginners 0 to 1 course, which is solely designed to get you from I want to invest in real estate to holy crap, I have a rental and it's cash flowing. And this course is not going to be anything super complicated that you won't be able to understand. It is just designed to teach you how to build a team, find investments, finance investments, conduct due diligence, close on the investment, and then operate it so that you can enter the real estate investing world smoothly. So if that sounds like something that interests you, definitely check out the link below, and it's cheap as hell right now. I would say there is a lot of subjective judgment. I think that it's interesting that you brought that up for spouses. You're right. Damned if you do, damned if you don't is super true. My wife wasn't working when we first got to Hawaii, definitely got some flack at some points. Then she started working, and then there's some more flack at other points. It's just like, you can't win, right? With guys, it's funny because it's like, if you're not working, you're a turd. But if you are working, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, that's kind of the stigma. It's totally different on the flip side.
If you don't have a job, you're a sucker, and if you're lazy, and if you do have a job, you're a sucker.
Yeah, and what's funny about that is with the exception of people like Alex who like turmoil, the real estate community in general is like probably one of the most supporting communities I know. I don't know that I've ever gone to a conference and had, well, anyone other than Alex tell me that I'm an idiot at the conference.
Well, but hang on.
Grounded.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're welcome.
No, but I mean, but like, no matter what strategy you use, even if you're totally different, it's usually from a standpoint of like, oh, well, that's interesting. Let me hear how you're doing that, right? It's not, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's obviously ways that are less successful or we disagree with, but I've never had anyone in a conference or at a networking event or anything sit me down and be like, you are an idiot. What the hell are you doing? Why don't you try it my way? And so I think that's kind of cool that you can tap into a community like that, which to me, at my personal experience, is a very positive and generally uplifting community.
Yeah. And I think that's because once you get into real estate, I think before you get in and before you get under your first deal, you're like, there's so much competition. There's no way I can compete. These people have money and they have time and they have resources. How am I supposed to compete with that? And it's such a bad attitude. And I know that because I was a victim of that attitude for years, and it deterred me from taking any kind of action. And now I know we're not competing against each other. Like, as long as there are people living on this earth and as long as people are putting roofs over their head, there's going to be plenty of deals to go around. And I think that people who are in real estate, especially ones that are doing well, they have that mindset and that attitude of abundance. They don't look at each other as competition, but rather we look at each other, we look to each other for those creative ideas and for also to elevate your game. I love talking about two other people and hearing their strategies. And especially when I hear about them being successful, I'm super competitive. So I have that little twinge of oh, that makes me jealous, but I want in a way that makes me want to go after it too. But I don't, it's not like I would hold it against them or think that I need to drag them down in order to be successful. I would rather just grab onto their coattails and let them pull me along, you know?
The people who are most negative, in my experience, I'm extrapolating from my personal experience, the people who are most negative about real estate are those who don't own it.
Exactly.
The people that have always told me, oh, real estate, tenants are a pain. They don't pay. They don't take care of your place. You got to do this, toilets, 2 a.m. phone calls. I'm like, I don't deal with any of that. Zero of that. I don't know how. And then you ask them, like, why are you dealing with those problems? They're like, well, I don't buy real estate. So I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Exactly.
My uncle told me.
It's funny you say that. So I dabbled in various, I would say I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit. Not that I really did anything with it, but I've always had ideas, right? And I struggled with getting shot down. All my ideas always got shot down for years. And I think the reason I finally, and I did some of them anyway, but the reason I think I finally jumped in with both feet into real estate is when I was bringing up what I was thinking of doing, I did not have anybody in my sphere of influence that told me it was a bad idea. I had a couple people that said, oh, you're going to have to deal with this, But even then they were like, yeah, you can make good money in it. Like that was probably the first time I'd ever had an idea like, oh, this is my idea of what I want to do, where the feedback I got, general consensus was, yeah, that's smart. Maybe not that way, or maybe not this part. But I didn't have anyone like, I talked about individual stock market and people were whatever. That's not everybody's strategy. But there were various things throughout life that I basically let people talk me out of, which might have been for the best. But I think that was kind of the like sounding board for me, was like, oh man, these same people have nothing but great things to say about real estate. I agree.
Yeah.
Everybody told me real estate was a bad idea. That's how I knew I had to do it.
Just out of spite.
Yeah.
Well, and I think kind of like what you're talking about, it's because I've never been told no by a title company. Like I'll try to come up with a solution to get my foot in the door and come up with this crazy off the wall idea. Like, for example, I own a property in my self-directed IRA that's partnered. My traditional IRA is partnered with my Roth IRA, and I own a property in my self-directed IRA. And it's just a crazy situation. Like, first of all, people don't know you can buy properties in your IRA, but you can, and there's lots of things you can do with a self-directed IRA. And then I didn't have enough money to cover the property that I wanted in my traditional, but if I brought my Roth into it, I was able to put that together. And it's like I'm literally partnered with myself on a property. And so when you're willing to think outside the box and put deals together, that's where the growth happens. There's only so much you can do with the cash that comes in. Like whether you have a W-2 job or 1099 job, or you already have a bunch of rentals, there is a limit to that cash flow, right? But you can leverage that in so many ways and so many different strategies and combinations of strategies to continue to build your portfolio. And what I tell people all the time is, don't worry about the money. Like, think creatively and have a goal and move toward it, and you're going to figure it out. I don't really know how to explain that further than like, I just keep finding the money to buy real estate.
How much time do you spend on your network though? Because the money's going to come. If you don't have any money, then the money has to come from the network. And so I agree with every day.
Every day.
Yep. I agree with that position. Like, if you find the deals, then the money will work out. But in some ways, I just want to push back on that a little bit, because it's like, if you go out there and you find the deal and you don't know anybody, like, it's not going to show up. It takes both. You have to have some little bit of, seeds planted into like, hey, if I do find a deal, might you be interested? And a lot of those, depending on how you finance it, at least, so that when you come up with the deal, it's not like, oh, by the way, I do real estate now. Do you want to give me a bunch of money for it? But I do agree with your overall premise. If you find good deals and you find solutions, like, people will pay for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, that I build the network every single day. My number one KPI every day is to network and to continue to build that base and to share with people what I'm doing, because that's networking right there. Just telling people what you're up to and planting seeds, because sometimes I'll have to talk to somebody 8 or 10 times before they're like, you know what, like, that might be something that I'm interested in. It might take them a while to come around or whatever, but yeah, you're right. You have to build that network, and that's something that takes time and takes deliberate effort.
I read your article on KPIs this morning, by the way, while I was on duty.
Yeah, I just wrote that because we kind of just ended up talking about that on the Bigger Pockets podcast. I wasn't really prepared to, and what people have been asking me about since that podcast was released is KPIs. Then they're like, can you develop KPIs for me? I'm like, well, it doesn't really work like that. You got to figure out what your goals are. You got to figure out what's getting you to your goals. and set them from there. But for me, like my goals are just to generally continue to grow this and scale this. And so the number one way that I can do that is to build my network every day.
Since we brought it up, or I brought it up, or you brought it up, however that came up, could you just briefly expound on what a KPI is and maybe like a 1-minute synopsis of the idea, just because I'm sure somebody listening to this has never heard that acronym before?
Yeah. So a KPI is a key performance indicator, and it's basically just a metric that measures like your output. And it's a way to basically bridge the gap from what you're doing to your goals. So you need to make sure that what your actions are actually contributing to your goals. And the only way to know that is if you measure the data and you keep track of it. Like you might think that analyzing 10 properties every day is going to lead to getting a property every quarter, but it's not. You have to make offers, right? So the KPI is making offers. It's not analyzing properties. So you have to make sure that the indicator that you're measuring is actually contributing to the end state. And I think that's what there's just kind of usually a missing piece in there.
Absolutely. How do you set up KPIs for networking?
So for me, like every Wednesday, one of the things that I do is just reach out to all the podcasters that I know about and ask if I can be on their show. That's a Wednesday thing. And then the rest of
reached out to.
What's that?
I had to find you.
Well, I have not done that since the Bigger Pockets podcast. But yeah, I appreciate that because I was able to knock off my KPI and so the other thing I found out is, well, at least pre-Bigger Pockets, it would take me like 3 requests or 3 like applications to get 1 accepted. So I knew that every Wednesday, if I wanted to record a podcast or at least schedule a podcast every week, because you can't, we'll go to that in a second, but to schedule a podcast every week, I'd ask 3 people. So now my KPIs are probably different. It's probably 2 to 1, or maybe every person I ask might say yes now. But the other thing you got to realize is the KPI isn't scheduled podcasts, because I have no control over whether or not somebody wants me on their podcast. The KPI is podcast applications or podcast requests. So I can control how many of those I do, how many people I ask, but I can't control how many people actually invite me to be on their show.
Yeah. The best way I had it explained to me when I first heard about KPIs, and this might, I don't know, maybe this resonates to some guys who are out there, girls who did recruiting duty, is as a recruiter, we have to track at your numbers every 90 days. And it comes down to how many people do you have to meet in public to write a contract? How many people do you have to call to write a contract? And how many people do you have to have an appointment with? And how many of those appointments turn into, like we track everything. And so it was literally just think of it as if you take 45 phone calls to get an interview, and you need 10 interviews, then you got to make 4,500 or 450 phone calls this month. And whether that results in the 10 interviews or not, this is what anyway. So I don't know, maybe that helps someone, maybe not. For the record,
regression analysis. So like I have a closing ratio of say 10%, 5% for all the deals that I put offers in. I get, if I have to put 20 offers in to get 1 close. And so I know that I have a 5% close ratio. So like you said earlier, it's like, well, that means if I need a deal, that means I need to be putting in 20 offers a week, 20 offers a month to get 1 deal. And then you adjust as, it's like, oh, well, that time it took me 25, that time it took me 30.
Yeah. Well, and typically you get better. So you should get more productive, especially if you're keeping track and improving. And then the other thing is to even take that 1 step further back. So, you have to put in 20 offers, but how many properties do you have to look at to even find those 20 to offer on?
Right. Yeah. Regression analysis. Yeah. I like this. This is how you should be. Well, David said it with recruiting, and it's the same way in all sales. It's like, you start with how many do you need to sell, but then you go from my closing ratio. And so it's the same. So if I have a 5% closing ratio, that means I got to talk to 20 people. Or whatever that may be. It means I have to put 20 offers in, which means I probably have to look at 100 deals.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, it's the good old LAPS funnel. If Brandon Turner ever listens to this, that'll make him happy that I just referenced that.
Yeah, funnel. That's a great way to look at it too.
Yeah. I thought you were going to ask something there. I was waiting on it. Oh man, I guess I would probably just roll into the my next question would be if a E1 E2 was to walk up to you looking for advice, and you had just a few minutes to talk to them, what would you tell them about whether life, real estate, whatever?
Yeah. So I think that the thing that I would tell people first is figure out what you want your future to look like. Figure out what it is that you're working for and you're working toward, and get a really clear definition of that. And from there, figure out where you are right now and bridge the gap. Come up with a plan to go from where you are now to where you want to go, no matter what it is that you're trying to pursue. But if you don't have a really clear picture of your future and what you're working toward, you're never going to accomplish it, for one, and you're probably just going to get discouraged and quit whenever something gets hard. So I think that anybody is capable of anything that they wrap their head around. The mind is a very powerful thing. But if you don't know what that is, then your mind can't work toward it, consciously or subconsciously. So I think getting really clear on your goals and getting really honest with yourself is step one. And then step two is figuring out exactly where you are right now. Do your own financial snapshot and figure out how you go from where you are now to where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. That's so simple, and so many people just don't do it. And it's like, you said it. How can you know where you're going? Well, if you don't really know where you want to go, and you don't know where you're at now, that's why people buy cars. They're like, I have no plan, and this Camaro looks good, so let's just get debt. Yeah. But if you had a plan, you're like, look, I love that Camaro, but it's not part of my plan, and I really want to get this thing over here. And like you said earlier, it's like, man, if I can just accumulate $3 million of real estate and then hang on, I can have all the Camaros I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I was saying before, it's way easier to be disciplined when you have a big goal. Like if you knew you wanted a $3 million portfolio and that came down to this $17,000 used car or this $65,000 Camaro, but they're both going to give you the same, the same things that you need. It's easy to make that decision.
Yep. Yes.
Yep. I'm I guess a true story with that, because I sold my race car 2 years ago. So
you had a race car? What kind of race car did you have?
We can talk about that when you're not going to just belittle me on a recording. No, I had a
Honda Civic.
No, it was a S2000. I had a Honda S2000 that I turboed.
Oh, that's a cool car.
Garage, so turboed, racing suspension, all kinds of fun stuff. It was a project. It was a good car.
You drove around an S2000 with that mustache?
I didn't have the mustache on recruiting duty, but I did. I did elect to drive the S2000 in my dress blues to high schools rather than the government little Chevy Malibu. And I would always park right in front of the school and have the interview at the end of the day, so that when the school let out, all the kids would have to see me sitting on my red convertible turbocharged car in my dress blues.
There's your KPI right there.
And then the Army recruiters would wonder why nobody wanted to enlist out of their school. And I'm like, you showed up in a Dodge Caravan.
And then you wonder why guys get in and buy race cars.
Hey. I wasn't providing financial advice yet. That was when I was buying my first property. I still owned the race car. I wasn't quite. This was after I totaled my Harley and was like, oh, new car, race car.
Erin, what kind of car do you drive?
I don't drive a car.
Oh my God.
No, so we're in a very unique situation out here in Monterey. My husband rides his bike to school. School is like a mile away. So we are actually sharing his F-150 right now, which basically is mine and the girls. And he rides his bike to school, and everything else we do together. So we decided when we moved out here, well, first of all, we didn't want to drive 2 cars across the country, especially because our daughter was like 7 months old when we drove out here. And the Army will either pay for you to drive 1 or ship 1. They won't pay for 2. So we would have had to ship the second one out of pocket. And I was like, by the time we do that and ship it back, we might as well just sell it. And so I sold it, and I bought a property with the $17,000 I got back from my car. And then when I'm done here, I just like a reliable car, but I'll buy something used. I'll pay cash for it. And it'll just be functional and in good shape. And that's all I really care about.
Smart.
Nice.
Yeah. I drive a functional car that I got for a steal. I think like 5 to 6 years old is like the money maker. Anyway, that could be a whole nother conversation. So, what would be, if you had to recommend like one resource, a book, podcast, website, whatever, for anybody looking to get started in real estate, what would you lean towards?
I think anyone getting started should probably focus on the mindset piece of it. I think that there's a lot of books out there that you can read once you figure out where you're trying to go. But I wouldn't want to encourage someone to read a property about flipping houses if they want to build a long-term portfolio. So I think like real estate specific stuff can come later. I think what's more important is the mindset piece of it and wrapping your head around getting ready to take some risk and pursue something big. So I would say any of Jen Sincero's mindset books or like Gary Vaynerchuk's mindset books.
I'm not familiar with Jen Sincero. What's
she wrote
Girl Wash Your Face.
No. That's Rachel Hollis.
Don't get Alex started on self-help.
But yeah, I've read that one too. But there's some good mindset stuff in there. She's a Christian author. But no, Jen Sincero does the badass ones. You are a badass at making money. And then I think the other one's like You Are a Badass. She's a couple other ones, but those are the two that I read. But You Are a Badass at Making Money is something I plan to read every year. She just talks about wrapping your head around realizing what your worth is and making that money happen for you, basically. So no matter what it is that you do, I think that book is productive.
Awesome. Cool. So before we wrap this up, is there anything you'd like to add? Any parting advice or big ideas?
I just say get after it. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. If I can do it, anybody can. If I can do it, I started this thing off with, I think, a 2-year-old, a deployed husband, and I was pregnant at the time. So the odds were in my head stacked against me, and it was a huge decision to get into it. But I am so glad I did, and I'll never look back. And I have a very different perspective on life and on money and on, taking control of my future. So just get out there and get after it.
Awesome. And where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So I am on Instagram at the Erin Helle, and I'm on Facebook as well, the Erin Helle. And my website is bcglobalinvestments.com. And then you can email me at erin@bcglobalinvestments.com.
Nice. Erin, you're the absolute best.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What is that face for?
If you guys are watching the video and you saw my reaction there, you know just how much that should mean.
Oh, God.
Alex,
I say it to everybody. Don't worry about it. Don't get excited.
Alex says nice things. No. You need to let that go to your head. That doesn't.
Erin, are you going to go to BPCon?
I hope to. I haven't planned anything yet. We just canceled 2 trips, and yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope we all go, I guess. If it happens, I'll be there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If it happens, I'll be there.
Yeah. And I guess if it's so not, if it's virtual, I'll be there as well.
Be there anyway, Alex.
If it's virtual, I'm not going.
You do like virtual networking, like, hey. Actually, supposedly there's software where you can anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Erin, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode about my journey from military to millionaire. If you liked it, be sure to visit FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast to subscribe to future podcasts. While you're there, we'd love for you to rate the show, give us a review on iTunes. Now get out there and take action.